What's up, Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of OP Patch Predictions. My name is Nathan Ng, and today we'll be looking at the changes coming on patch 11.6 and how they may change or fail to change the state of the game. First off, we'll be starting to take a look at the direct champion buffs on 11.6, with the first one being a pretty big touch-up on Xin Zhao's kit. Usually when you hear a buff, you imagine a champion getting changes that result in increased tankiness and damage by increasing the numbers here and there, or maybe lowering their cooldowns. But in some cases, that isn't quite enough. The changes Xin is going to be getting will bring his whole kit up to a modern standard of League, while retaining his ability's current functionality. If you haven't already seen the changes that he's getting, here's a rundown of what's to come. His passive's base heal is slightly lowered later, but the AP ratio is going from 40% to 55%. Q will do a little bit less damage in the earlier ranks. W is getting an update for better visual clarity. On top of that, it has a lower cooldown, increased mana cost, the time to cast is no longer lowered by having more attack speed, and it has its damage reduction versus minions go down over the course of the game, eventually falling off at level 16. The second part of his W now challenges champions and monsters, providing vision for 3 seconds, has a 50% AP ratio, and has its base damage by up to 33% on crit strike chance. E's cooldown is going down by 1 second, dashes a bit slower, and has a cast range increase of 1100 on challenged targets. Instead of R having a 3-second duration that can be extended by attacking your foes, its duration now actually is always 5 seconds. Additionally, it now has a 110% AP ratio. As I said before, this is a type of change that does more than just shove a ton of damage on a weak champion in an attempt to brute force them into the meta. Adding more functions to his abilities without taking away from what they already do, like Shin's W granting vision, are great ways to push the champion back into the meta. And this isn't the first time that we've seen something like this done. Annie received similar treatment not too long ago on patch 10.22. They changed her E from being a flat amount of damage reduction on herself to a shield that she can actually give to her allies. The Molten Shield retains its identity of doing thorns damage to attacks, but now was a little bit more flexible, especially since it now grants movement speed, which is pretty big for the otherwise immobile Annie, who just used to have to rely on either flashing to engage or just waiting in a bush to catch out opponents. Changes like these are why champions like Annie can feel not too out of place in today's League of Legends, despite being one of the first champions on the roster more than 12 years ago. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What other champions do you think can use buffs like these? We want to know what champions you think are a little bit dated, but with a couple of changes could be OP picks. Remember, this isn't just about full VGUs, just a bit of modernization. Let us know what champions you'd like to see get some touch-ups in the comments down below. Now, let's get back to talking about Xin. With the 11.4 changes making high gank junglers a lot more of a powerful option, Xin Zhao will definitely be a stronger pick now. While he's getting several significant changes, there's one thing that stands out above the rest. E's range being increased to 1100 against challenged targets is huge for getting onto your opponents. Even Ezreal with his E and Flash available cannot put enough distance between the two of you to be out of your charge range. The charge range buff also works very nicely in conjunction with the W changes, since W can now reach up to 1000 units and applies to challenge debuffs. While the current Xin Zhao can really only gank super overextended targets, and usually even then only those that have complete lack of mobility, these changes will give more opportunities to use his aggressive early game kit to secure leads, and then maybe get into priority targets in team fights. The last major point from these changes is the addition of some pretty massive AP ratios and his W being increased by crit chance. While Xin has always been able to flex between a carry-oriented build for dueling and assassinating targets, and going a tankier teamfight build to serve as an engage, these changes mean even more options. AP Xin was a thing at one point, and you can't really rule out him making a return. Even if you don't go full AP, I do expect to see Nashor's Tooth to be pretty popular on him. Crit Xin would be able to pump out insane DPS, and while glass cannon builds are often pretty risky on melee champions in teamfights, Shin's ult serves as a great tool to help mitigate that risk a lot. In that 5-second window, you can easily burst down any squishy carry you're able to get onto as you shrug off the damage from anyone outside of the radius. Of course, even if we don't see the new builds aimed at dishing out insane damage, even the standard bruiser Xin will be incredibly strong with all the tools at his disposal. We can't really be too sure about what the best possible builds will be yet, so make sure you're subbed and keep an eye out for when we do. The second big change that we're seeing this patch is one to AKALI. While the changes aren't as complex as the ones that we're seeing to Xin, they're definitely going to have a pretty big impact, especially in high elo, where AKALI does super well as a counterpick in many situations. The super important change here is the one that affects her energy pool. Looking back at the past, AKALI has always been most broken when her Q cost has been lowered, and since it's going all the way down to 70 at max rank, you can pretty much spam it freely, up to 4 times in a row when you take that extra 80 damage from her W into account. And since that W gives you an increase to your total energy pool, you'll also be getting more energy back from presence of mind. Energy aside, the changes to Akali's HP are pretty noteworthy. While you're squishier in the earlier stages of the lane, making you more punishable by lane bullies, the higher HP per level actually means you become tankier once you get to the mid to late game stages. This is a super welcome change because you're a melee assassin that has to dive past the enemy frontliners to reach the high priority targets. In addition to her Q being more spammable, resulting in more damage output, her E and ultimate are seeing some pretty big buffs. Buffing her E is, in my opinion, one of the heavier ways to bring up Akali's damage, since the first part requires her to hit a relatively hard to land skill shot, and the second part requires her to go into melee range and risk taking retaliation damage as a result. The ultimate buff is also pretty significant. Since Gunblade won't exist anymore, Akali doesn't even build items that have AD on them, aside from the minority of players who start Doran's Blade. With that in mind, the only ratio on her R1 being the bonus AD doesn't really make much sense. Seeing it get an AP ratio and having the damage type swap to magic makes a lot more sense. With all these changes, we can confidently say that she's on our list of the OP picks in the mid lane, and with so many nerfs to the top laners and their items, she may even be a safe blind pick in the top lane. Akali has always been a champion that has dominated at the highest level, with lower players really struggling to make her work. Even right now, at the time that we're making this video, she's sitting at an overall 45% win rate, but just over 52% in Master Plus. If you want to learn how to abuse broken picks like Akali, but you don't know where to begin, maybe we can help. With the ProGuides subscription, you can get full access to our course, unlimited chats with our top tier coaches, and you'll even get discounted rates if you choose to book a session. And there's no better time to sub than now, because we're doing a pretty big deal. Just use the discount code RANKUP2021 for your 20% off your sub. Now, without further ado, let's get back into the changes. The rest of the champion changes are much lighter in magnitude, and don't really change nearly as much as the first two ones. The most notable one is to Volibear. With Turbo Chem Tank becoming more and more prevalent in the meta, I expect to see Chem Tank Volibear pick up some traction, but I don't think he quite qualifies as an OP pick, maybe something more like a strong A-tier jungle. But with Turbo Chem Tank, you could go ahead and chase and follow me on twitch.tv/Nathan_ing. Yeah, that's a shameless self-plug there. The other three changes are pretty unimpressive. Sylas will be a stronger situational pick, but the buffs he's seeing won't really change the frequency that you can pick him. He'll just be better where he's already good. Pyke's E cooldown being lowered as you rank it up is a nice touch, but like Sylas, won't really make him a good pick all the time. But honestly, screw Pyke, I could care less. Stop buffing him. Please, I don't want to see him in the game. I don't care if he's weak, like I prefer that. Anyway, LeBlanc's W mana cost being lowered means nothing, since going is the last of her problems. Now let's take a look at some of the more systematic changes to items and runes this patch. With Fleet and Ravenous Hunter both taking really heavy hits, the combination of Doran Shield and either Second Wind or Biscuits will be huge in lanes where you need heavy sustain. I expect this combo to be ran on almost every melee champion, and even on some shorter range marksmen that could get outpoked. SHURELYA'S. The change to SHURELYA'S isn't enough to make it more powerful than Moonstone Renewer when it comes to general teamfighting strength, but the lower cooldown means that you'll have more chances to enable your teams to take fights when the team comps require you to pick it up. Arguably, the biggest change to the items that we're seeing is a massive buff to LUDEN'S. Now, dealing ability damage to champion reduces the cooldown by 0.5 seconds up to 3 seconds per spell cast. With Leandre's getting a pretty big adjustment that we see as an overall nerf, you can expect LUDEN'S to become more popular on several champions, especially those with low cooldown, spamming abilities like Rise and Cassiopeia, and even more OP on the champions that should already be building it. The last thing that we'll be talking about is the buffing of tanks, both directly and indirectly. With the runes and items being slowly nerfed over time, the bruisers that completely dominated the preseason have been mostly reeled in, and are at a point where they are about equal or barely above the tanks in the top lane. But finally, with 11.6, we predict that tanks are going to be more definitely dominant in that role. Not only are Stridebreaker, Blade of the Ruin King, and Serax Gauge all seeing pretty significant nerfs, but Sunfire Aegis is also getting a buff. Sunfire Aegis is the more dominant-oriented mythic to go on tanks when you want to duel your laner. This will make it easier to throw your weight around on these beefier picks, and gives you more strength as a side laner against bruisers that may have previously been able to outscale you at one point as a split pusher. Anyway, that about wraps up everything on our OP Patch Predictions 11.6 edition. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on content such as this. Remember, let us know what champions you'd like to see get the Xin Zhao treatment down in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can go ahead and discuss League further, or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.